Hello, everybody. How are you tonight? Welcome to Shadow at Night for Tuesday, April the 8th, 2025. Okay, I have to tell you that I lost count of how many messages I received today regarding the Randy Hillier interview last night. And Randy's always a great guy to have on. But the best part, everybody was saying, the best part of the interview last night. And we know that he had a great court ruling yesterday, and it's going to have ramifications for all of these cases all across Ontario and possibly even Canada. And I think that's awesome. But the best part of the show last night was about an hour in when Randy excused... when Randy excused himself and said, "Oh, play a good song or something. I'll be back in a few minutes." And I said, "What, you got to go take a leak?" And then he just went. He was gone. And he came back a few minutes later, and we continued the conversation. But it was just such a surprise. And I guess my reaction to what he said, people thought was hilarious. And I want to thank you guys for sending me those messages today via email and messenger and whatever other way you have of getting a hold of me on X or on Telegram or whatever. It was really cool to hear that, because that's what happens in live TV sometimes. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, my friends, is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com.
Toothpaste. First, we're starting out with Crest. It's a classic. It's an original. It's what I've used most of my life. But that being said, it does have its problems. First off, the consistency is so weird and thick, and I get it's a paste, but it really doesn't spread that well. And I must also say that I'm not in love with the taste. I get toothpaste isn't supposed to taste good, but why shouldn't it? But that being said, it does get the job done. Next, we have Silverceuticals. They have 3 flavors, but today we're going with Bubbleberry. And already it smells so good. So I'm excited to see what this tastes like. The consistency is also a lot smoother, and I must say it spreads way nicer in your mouth.
This literally tastes like fruit bubblegum.
Yeah, this toothpaste was pretty good. I actually went in for seconds, and it's infused with nano silver, so it helps remineralize your teeth and keep them fresh throughout the day.
100% go with Silverceuticals.
And here's the results. What's your favorite toothpaste?
CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com to get a hold of Kevin and Anna and order some of these products. Or just find out more about these products. You can give them a call there. You see the number 204-808-9292. And there's a new retailer, Kev tells me, Red Deer Golden Sun Health Foods is now going to be retailing. I guess I should take this off the screen now. Is now going to be retailing Canada Nano Silver. Congratulations to Golden Sun Health Foods in Red Deer, Alberta. And thank you very much for your support of Canada Nano Silver. And so Kevin and Anna, tracking their trip across the country because they live just north of the city of Winnipeg. They went out to Calgary last weekend for the National Women's Show at Stampede Park, where they had a great time, met a lot of great people. And a lot of you guys, I understand, dropped by to say hello. And this coming weekend, they're going to be up in Yorkton, Saskatchewan for the Spring Expo up there. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, from noon to 7 Friday, then 10 to 7 on Saturday. That's going to be a big, long day for them. And then Sunday from 10 till 4. Canada Nano Silver will be presenting 25 Nano Silver products at booth number 9. For more information, again, it is CanadaNanoSilver.com. And they stopped, Kevin and Anna did, in Mirror today on their way to Yorkton from Calgary, and they had lunch at the Whistle Stop Cafe where they met the one and only Chris Scott. And they got a photo, which I forgot to download so I could show you. But yeah, they said they had a great lunch there and had a great time chit-chatting with Chris. And so I'm so happy when our people get out and meet each other. That really, really, really puts a smile on my face. So thank you, guys. Don't forget to like and share. Who's watching tonight? Rick is watching in Powell River. Hello, Lucette watching in St. Jean. Germaine is watching in Sudbury. Hello, Laura in Beausejour. Leonard's watching in Sudbury. Hello, Derek. Hello, Barb in Stony Mountain. Jeannie's watching in Stonewall. Kevin, hello in Calgary. Luella in Red Deer. She's watching tonight. Kathy in Bothwell. Roseanne in Southern Manitoba. Lise in Strathmore, Alberta. Christine's watching in Enola. Hello, Karen in Grand Beach. Kathy in Sault Ste. Marie. Gloria is watching in Winnipeg. Robert's watching in beautiful Kelowna, British Columbia. And Lolita and Audrey. Audrey is in Sherwood Park, and Lolita's watching in Winnipeg. No matter what platform you're watching on, no matter where you're watching from, on Rumble, Amnesty, Native Beauty 1, Nana Sue, Lone Arnie is here tonight. Aw, poor Lone Arnie. Patricia0711. No matter what platform you guys are watching on tonight, don't forget to like and share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. Oh, one more thing for you All Access members who stay with me and are members on the website, shadowdavis.com. Starting on Thursday night, we're going to start the giveaways. So you're going to have your choice of a brand new Shadow at Night Live ball cap or the Shadow at Night coffee mug, 20-ounce coffee mug. So that's what it looks like on the front. The other side says, Truth Matters. Truth Matters. So there you go. You'll have your choice between mug or between hat. Starting on Thursday night, these giveaways. We're going to do one, maybe two a week if I'm feeling really generous as we continue on. And then after a few months, we're going to make them available for sale to All Access members only. And then we might start opening up things a little bit to everybody else. So please become a member, an All Access member at shadowdavis.com. You get the extra content after 9 o'clock every night. And you don't have to watch it live. You can always go back and watch it the next day or the next week if you want to. There's no obligation to stay up and stay watching me for 2.5 hours, you guys, because I know that's a lot. Too much of a good thing, right? Pierre Poilievre had a very big rally in Edmonton last night as we were interviewing Randy Hillier. The rally was going on in Edmonton. Some say 15,000, some say 10,000. It was huge no matter what the situation. And there was a special guest at the rally last night to introduce Pierre, and here he is.
Now needs change more desperately than it perhaps ever has. And it needs someone to lead that change, my friends. As someone who had the honor of serving as your Prime Minister, I know that being Prime Minister is a trust. It is a trust to take this incredible country that our ancestors bequeathed us and to leave it stronger, more united, more compassionate, and more confident than we found it. That's what we did, my friends, but that is not the story of the past decade, and that has got to change for Canada. You know, friends, I am in a unique position in this federal election. I am the only person who can say that both of the men running to be Prime Minister once worked for me. And in that regard, my choice, without hesitation, without equivocation, without a shadow of a doubt, is Pierre Poilievre.
Again, some are saying 10,000, some are saying 15,000. Mark Carney had a rally, I think, in Burnaby, British Columbia last night, and they got about 1,000 people out to that, they say, which probably means about 700, even lower, because all political parties lie about numbers. You can see for yourself, if you're good with your eyeball, sizing up crowds, right? I have that gift for some crazy reason. I've had it since I was a kid, so I can look at a crowd and pretty much give you within a couple of hundred exactly how big it is. But on video, it's a different situation. If you're there in the middle of it, well, that's one thing. But if you're looking at it on video, it's a whole different thing. So I can't tell you from my eyeball exactly how many people were there in Edmonton last night, but there were a lot of people. As a matter of fact, Pierre Poilievre was asked about that this morning by a reporter from the Globe and Mail, and in this clip, the Liberals all over X and Facebook, all over social media, they're freaking out. Pierre Poilievre's treatment of a female reporter is absolutely outrageously terrible. He's awful. He's brutal. I think it's funny. Let's have a look at this.
Mr. Poilievre, Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. I want to ask about...
How did you like our rally last night?
Well, I wanted to ask about your rallies.
Thank you.
And whether size matters. I actually want to know about your rallies and what your strategy is and who you're talking to, because you bring up things like woke mob, Century Initiative, bulldozing the CBC, I'm exaggerating, but getting rid of CBC HQ. At what point are you just talking in an echo chamber to people who already feel that way, or do you feel like these are broadening the tent of support to Liberal or undecided voters to get them on board with your campaign?
I think it's pretty broad. I think how many people do you think we had last night?
Thousands.
Well, that's pretty obvious. I think you can be more precise than that.
I don't. I mean, the party said 10,000 registered. There's reports of 15. I really can't say.
One last question. When was the last time we had a rally that big in Canada?
I don't know. I've never been to one.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it here for 1 second. We'll play the rest for you, but just look at him. Does he seem to have his confidence back to you? For a couple of weeks there, it seemed to me that he was really struggling. He was really having a problem with the media. He was having problems stammering and stumbling while giving speeches, not at rallies, but in front of reporters, and then answering questions later on. He seemed to have lost his mojo somehow, but now he seems to have it back. And I think these rallies are what's giving him the energy to do that. And I also think that he's found out something else, that these polls are a fraud. Anyway, let's carry on with the rest of this clip.
A political rally that big, I don't think.
You know a lot about politics.
Well,
You're a very well-informed person. I know that if there were a bigger rally than that, you would know about it. I think so. But I think it was pretty incredible. Were any of you there? Yes. Magic, eh? Wow. Incredible. Listen, I think to have 10 or 15,000 people at one political rally, this is a movement like we've never seen, because people want change. They want to put our country first for a change. They've seen that after the lost Liberal decade of doubling housing costs, of rising crime, of taxes out of control, of our economy weak and under America's thumb, they can't afford to live. And what they want is a new Conservative government that will put Canada first for a change. And that's why my speech talked about axing taxes, greenlighting housing construction, expanding our energy sector to bring home our jobs so that we can put Canada first for a change. That was the message yesterday, and that is the message that Canadians are going to vote for change on Election Day.
All right. With reporters, he was very cautious, as I pointed out. But today, at a press conference, he was asked about Mark Carney ripping off his ideas, about Mark Carney being accused of being propped up by the communist government of China, about a lot of his ridiculous Carney's ESG practices when he was with Brookfield Asset Management. And Poilievre just let rip on Carney today. Watch this.
Unpack what Mr. Carney did in this particular case. He used his political power to convince the British government to require more expensive jet fuel for air travel. And then his company invested $1 billion in the company that was selling that jet fuel. So if, God forbid, a family like the people behind me here want to take their kids on a vacation somewhere, they have to pay higher airplane ticket prices to fund this more expensive jet fuel so that Mark Carney's $1 billion investment can pay off. Mr. Carney is not a businessman. He is a political grifter who has used his political influence to turn decisions that profit his company at the expense of workers and seniors. And that is exactly how he would govern the country. While he was Justin Trudeau.
He is a political grifter. That is a huge slap across the face and shot across the bow to Mark Carney. Now, when these debates come up in the next week and a half, the French debate first and then the English debate the very next night, I wonder how they're going to have it structured and formatted. Are they going to be able to speak directly with each other? Or are they going to just ask one question to one person, one question to the other? Because you don't want 4 or 5 people all yelling and screaming across the stage at each other. At crosstalk, we wouldn't be able to hear what they're saying. But I think people just want to hear. I mean, never mind Jagmeet Singh. I'm going to show you the poll in just a second from Abacus. Never mind the Green Party. Never mind PPC at this stage of the game. They're at 3 or 4%. It doesn't matter. The two heavyweights right now, the main card that everybody wants to see is Poilievre versus Carney. And if he goes at Carney like this during the debate, I think it's a landslide. It's a blue wave running right across the country.
Economic advisor. He went on the record saying that he thought there should be more inflation. He thought it would be good if there was more inflation. Well, it turns out Brookfield, his company, profits from inflation. They get to charge higher rents on their tenants, according to their CEO. So he has used his political influence to rip off workers and seniors. And now, with all the political power of a prime minister, he continues to be invested in the same company, Brookfield, the same company that benefits by raising inflation, by raising energy prices, and by ripping off workers and seniors. Today's announcement is another example of that. How would Mark Carney ever be trusted to make our tax system fair when he's invested in a company that has billions of dollars of cash stashed away in an overseas tax haven? Of course, he never would.
So when you sit down and think about it, you hear something like, and you go, okay, that's a politician. He's just talking he's talking garbage against his opponent. Absolutely. They all do it, right? But if you were at all curious about who you wanted to be your next prime minister, wouldn't you go and investigate just a little bit, just to see a story or two about this Mark Carney guy? Who is this guy anyway? I mean, I hadn't even heard of him 2 months ago. Who is he? I don't know. Let's go look him up. Let's go see what there is. And even the left-wing corporate media is writing some interesting stuff about Mark Carney, which we'll get to in just a second. Brian Lilly of the Toronto Sun asked Pierre Poilievre earlier today, because you heard Randy Hillier and I talking about this last night when we had our discussion about PPC versus CPC and how Randy thinks it's all Political parties are all a cesspool and whatnot. And if there was no PPC candidate running in his riding, then he would vote for an independent because he has no time for traditional political parties. They're all bought and paid for. They're all run by the Laurentian elite or China or the World Economic Forum or whatever. Randy and I agree to disagree on that, even though he has years of experience in politics, whereas I don't. And he did tell some fantastic stories about that. But I still believe, even though I got kicked out of that rally a week and a half ago, it doesn't matter. It's not about me. And so many people say, shut up, stop talking about that. I say, look, the reason that I say this is because I believe Canada's future is at risk here. Big time. And if 30% of the Conservative Party is somehow co-opted by some foreign power or the World Economic Forum or the Bilderbergs or whatever, it's better than 100% of the Liberal Party. And right now we have to put out the fire before we can build a new foundation. 4 years of a Conservative government in this country will give us time to get our crap together, if in fact we're ever able to do that. With all of the fighting and bitching and moaning and arguing that I see amongst freedom-thinking people in this country, it seems like that may never happen unless we have some kind of coalescing figure that can do that. And who wants to be that figure? Who could be? Because you know that the second somebody stood up and said, hey, can't we just get along? The other person would say, no, we can't. And there would be 8 other people who had to pipe in. That's the situation we're in because we're all free thinkers. Anyway, Brian Lilly from the Toronto Sun asks Pierre Poilievre, hey, you know what? Your platforms, you and Carney, they're starting to sound pretty similar because he's ripping off everything you say just a day or two later. And here was Poilievre's response to that.
Outside of Bill C-69, which you made clear yesterday, you would not repeal, and you made clear you would. Outside of that, how are voters supposed to look at both of you and say, okay, how are they different? Who has the best plan? Because often things are sounding similar based on how each of you are speaking. So what's the difference?
Well, sincerity, for one. Mr. Carney opposed all of these policies for 10 years as part of the Liberal government. I mean, look, he advised Trudeau to print money and run up huge deficits that drove inflation. He opposes pipelines and energy production here in Canada. His policy on housing is the same as Trudeau's, building up monstrous bureaucracies in Ottawa. His latest is a $35 billion government construction company, which is going to build prefab tiny homes with no driveways. What could possibly go wrong? Building up housing bureaucracies in Ottawa has doubled housing costs during the lost Liberal decade. And giving Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney a 4th term will only make it worse. Then there's crime. Mark Carney supports the entire radical catch-and-release, hug-a-thug criminal justice policy that has turned our streets into war zones in many of our biggest cities. He supports the distribution of tax-funded drugs, and he continues to stand by the entire Liberal agenda of the last decade. If you want to know what the Liberals will do with a 4th term, look what they did with the last 10 years. If you want to know what I'll do, look what I've been saying for the last 10 years. It hasn't changed. I have said exactly the same thing for the last 10 years, and it turns out that the things we must do to counter Donald Trump are all the things I said we should be doing before he even threatened the tariffs. We need to repeal the No New Pipelines Law, C-69. We need to cut taxes on workers. We need to allow tax-free reinvestment of capital gains in Canada. We need to take taxes off new homes so that we can employ our trades workers in a field that doesn't require the Americans, that is to say, building homes on our own soil. We need to secure our streets and lock up the criminals to bring home safety. In essence, what we need after a lost Liberal decade is not a 4th term. What we need is a new government that will put Canada first for a change.
All right. He's having a great week, and it's only Tuesday. So maybe this momentum will start to build with, 2.5? Well, I guess just under 3 weeks left before voting day on April 28th. And as Michael in the comments is reminding everybody, you guys can vote earlier. You can vote earlier. You got your voting card in the mail, I'm sure, or maybe it's hanging on your door if you live in an apartment, or in your mailbox if you're in a house. Meanwhile, we're going to get to the abacus poll in just a second. I'll show you in just a second. Here's Mark Carney talking about housing, this whole new government department he wants to start, this Canada Government Housing Initiative, and who he wants to build the houses for. Never mind veterans, never mind the homeless we already have, never mind the people who can't afford to rub two dimes together right now, literally, and are living in their cars. You know, young mothers and fathers and their kids living in their cars because they can't afford an apartment, and both are working full-time jobs. It's true. It's happening right now in our country. But here's what Mark Carney wants to spend our housing money on. Watch this.
Respect immigration. Last point. They are... We have not lived up to our promise to those we brought to this country. We don't have the capacity in terms of housing, social services, and those who came as students. They're not all getting the education they deserve in Canada. We need to build that capacity. We need to manage immigration at lower levels for a period of time, until we have those results and the capacity. And of course, that means working very, very closely between the federal.
So what does that mean, Mark? For a period of time. Until what? You've got everybody settled in their new free homes, and then you can start bringing them all in by the hundreds of thousands again, like your buddy with the Century Initiative wants you to do? For a period of time.
Provincial governments.
All right, so he wants to build all of these houses for the immigrants. And I'm telling you, and again, they're not the legal immigrants. We're talking about the refugees and the people who are here illegally, or students who have overstayed their visas, all of that stuff. And never mind the between 20 and 500,000 illegals that are here in the country right now that are supposed to leave, but the government just doesn't know where they are. I don't know. I don't know how many. I don't know where they are, but we're going to get them. Of course you are. No, the government, actually, the Liberal government, expects that they're going to leave of their own accord. And maybe if it gets cold enough next winter, they will. Mark Carney was asked by a left-wing corporate media reporter today, which I find odd that it seems as though starting to hold his feet to the fire, right? It's actually kind of comical. He was asked about why the Chinese social media network WeChat in Canada, yeah, we have that here in Canada, believe it or not, for newly immigrated Chinese nationals, so they can communicate with their families back home. Why that particular social media network is promoting him to win the election. And I want to show you something else, too, on Google in just a second after this clip. But watch what he says here.
Ending, some of the campaign was pushing positive narratives about you. Why do you think that China, the PRC, seems to like you? Why are they praising you?
I have absolutely no idea, and I have absolutely no idea, and I think I'll leave it at that.
I'm sorry, but we have to watch that again.
Some of the campaign was pushing positive narratives about you. Why do you think that China, the PRC, seems to like you? Why are they praising you?
I have absolutely no idea, and I have absolutely no idea, and I think look
at that asshat Jonathan Wilkinson in the background. He's the Liberal MP for North Van. He might win again. Look at him, smug. Smugness is not a good quality. But Mark Carney, I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that.
I'll leave it at that.
Can you imagine this guy in a debate with Pierre Poilievre? He's going to get eaten alive. But the big thing here is, why is the Chinese social media network in Canada promoting Mark Carney as their preferred candidate for prime minister? Well, that's a very good question. Let's throw this up here. I'm going to just throw up the screen, which I forgot to do, so I'm going to do now. Let me see if I can make it happen quickly here. Okay, so we're going to bring up the screen. There it is. So in a Google search, just Google, never mind Yandex or any of the others brave. Just go with Google for now on this particular situation. Mark Carney, China, 3 words. You type into the search bar. What comes up? All of the left-wing corporate media say, Carney, except for the National Post, I'll give them credit for this. Carney targeted by Chinese WeChat operation, quotes, in Canada election officials. What? How is he being targeted exactly? They're promoting him. They're not targeting him. So what a misleading, almost false headline that is from Global News. And as we roll down, Toronto Star says Mark Carney targeted by Chinese news account on WeChat. Foreign interference. Targeted? They're making him sound like a victim, which he's not. They're making him sound like he's being attacked by China, which he isn't. He is being promoted by China. But these people, these left-wing corporate media, they don't expect anybody, well, 90% of the people, to actually read the story or anything past the first paragraph. Just the headline of the first paragraph. And we'll go, and so we are, technically they can say, we are reporting the story. Look, here's the story. It says right in the story that China is promoting Mark Carney for prime minister. Well, then why did you write this headline? Well, they are targeting him. I suppose you could say it like that. But when you use the word target, that's kind of a negative connotation in most situations. Am I wrong? Of course I'm not wrong. All right, let's have a look at this. This is from the left-wing corporate, publicly funded CBC of all places. Carney's former firm, Brookfield, this is from 4 days ago, so I guess Saturday, has been accused of breaching Indigenous rights in 4 countries. Oh, I wonder how those residential school advocates are going to feel about Carney now, because he was CEO of the company as this was going on, allegedly. Allegations in Brazil, Canada, Colombia, and U.S. involve dams, wind farm, other operations. So let's go ahead and check out this story. Under Mark Carney's leadership, global investment firm Brookfield was accused of breaching Indigenous rights or harming the environment in at least 4 countries, CBC Indigenous has found. Carney, who's running for prime minister, is Liberal. Why do they even have to say that at this stage of the game? I think we all know. Spent more than 4 years as vice chair and then chair of Brookfield Asset Management, where he focused on green investing and renewable energy. During that period, from 2020 to 2024, Brookfield businesses faced reports of serious human rights abuses in Brazil, Indigenous resistance in Colombia, a First Nations $100 million lawsuit in Ontario, and an environmental dispute in Maine. In Ontario, Maine, and Colombia, Brookfield owned hydroelectric dams, and 1 wind farm allegedly threatened Indigenous rights or damaged the environment. In Brazil, international NGO Global Witness accused Brookfield and subsidiaries of deforestation and human rights violations, including the attempted eviction of an Indigenous group and breach of anti-slave labor law in 2020. Mark Carney doesn't care. He doesn't care about these people. He doesn't care about the Uyghurs in China. We're going to get to that a little bit later on. While the multinational conglomerate denied any wrongdoing, the disputes have raised questions about the former central banker, you think, and UN climate action envoy's track record. I'm not trying to point a finger at him personally, but the company of Brookfield, no, is not measuring up to what they could do and should do, and now we're saying must do legally. That's from Kate Kempton, a lawyer in Toronto. So, yeah, Carney not having a great week so far. And I really can't see how, with all of these negative stories, even in the left-wing corporate media, how this poll is even possible. Look at it. This is from Abacus, probably the most trusted polling firm that I've been looking at for the past month and a half. They've stayed fairly consistent with their results. So these are the national findings from 2 days ago. The Liberals, 39%. The Conservatives, 39%. The NDP at 11%. By the way, there's a risk, some are saying anyway, that the NDP will actually lose official party status, which is 12 seats in the House of Commons, which would be funny. The Bloc at 6%. Then the Greens at 3%. The People's Party at 2%. Let's look region by region here. Never mind federal vote intention and what voter enthusiasm is like. It's higher for the Conservative voters, by the way, at 75%. 75% of all Conservative voters say, yes, I'm definitely getting out to vote. 71% of Liberals say the same thing, and 60% of NDP voters. So let's have a look at region by region here. I find this worrisome. But then again, when you look at the size of these rallies, How can I guess it just leads to confusion, right? I mean, if Poilievre can draw 10 or 15,000 people in Edmonton and the size of his rallies just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, then what's this all about? It can't be real. But in BC, it's very tight between the Liberals and Conservatives here, 39 to 36 in favor of the Conservatives, with the NDP at 19, which is extremely low. In Alberta, obviously, 58% blue and 27% red. The NDP don't matter. By the way, there's 2% in BC for the People's Party. In Saskatchewan, Manitoba, 49 Conservative, 33 Liberal, 16 for the NDP. Ontario, this is worrisome, 45% for the Liberals, and the Liberals have more of a concentrated vote in Ontario, which means they could get all of Toronto and Ottawa again. That's a lot of seats. And Montreal as well, if Quebec holds true, and I don't think it will. Look at the Bloc down there at 25%. I don't think so. Carney can't speak French. I think that these debates are going to say a lot about what happens. Anyway, Ontario, 45 Liberal, 39 Conservative, 10% NDP. You think Jagmeet Singh's going to be out of a job? I predicted months ago that Wab Kinew, the Premier of Manitoba right now, is going to be the new NDP federal leader in the next couple of months. We'll have to wait and see on that one. So Quebec, Liberals in the lead, and then Atlantic Canada, where there's 4% support for the PPC. That's their strongest region. I find that weird as well. Like, what? No. 51% for the Liberals? Are you kidding me right now? Whereas just about a month and a half ago, this was the other way around. I just don't see that people... I can't believe that Canadians could be this stupid. And that's why it's so mind-boggling to look at these polls. 51% of people in Atlantic Canada would say Liberal, and 32% would say Conservative, and then 9% would say Liberal. And there's another poll that we got here from Juno News that finds a Liberal win in this election would lead to a spike in separatist sentiments across Canada. This new poll suggests that Canadian unity may be at stake in this federal election, as Danielle Smith has suggested, and both the main party leaders have kind of downplayed. Do you think there would be some kind of political win for Pierre Poilievre? And I know that he probably doesn't want to go down this path, but if he said something like, I've been hearing rumblings of an Alberta independence movement gaining big steam, and if the Liberals win, I feel like that's going to boil over, and it's quite possible, and I don't want this to happen. This is Poilievre talking right now, and I don't want this to happen, but it's possible that Alberta could decide they want to leave Confederation. We don't want that to happen. Do you think Poilievre could use that as some kind of a strategy? I think he probably could. I look at this as a win-win, you guys. Poilievre wins. We're good for a few years. We've got time, a little bit of runway. We can get our own stuff together, especially when the Conservatives start disappointing us down the line, as we know they inevitably will. But we cannot deal with Mark Carney. We cannot deal with a Liberal government again, because they'll act quickly, and they will stifle us very fast, very, very fast. But if the Liberals win, Alberta hopefully decides they want to separate. But let's have a look at these numbers a little bit more. This new poll suggesting that Canadian unity may be at stake, and what they're saying here is a quarter of Albertans, that's only 25%, and 2 in 10 Saskatchewanians say the same. That's 20%. So that's kind of low, considering the last poll we heard about had people in favor of separation at 37%. But this, and Angus Reid, again, I mean, you can't really buy what these guys are selling right now. This poll came out Sunday. It highlighted that the eastern provinces are far less willing to separate. Between December of last year and March of this year, those in Alberta and Saskatchewan who felt respected by the rest of the country declined, with a notable 14-point drop in Saskatchewan. The level of respect Albertans feel from the rest of the country is the lowest it's been since the first poll was conducted in September of 2016. Those in Saskatchewan reported the lowest level of fair treatment by the federal government. Conversely, Ontario residents feel the most fairly treated. Of course they do. Of course they do. They get everything all the time. Despite numerous Canadians desiring separation, the poll highlighted that the separatist movement was larger in 2019 when 6 in 10 Albertans and 53% of Saskatchewanians were open to the concept of a Western Canadian separatist movement. So whenever you see anybody just make the assumption that Alberta is going to separate, please don't take that as fact. And that's something I've been saying. As much as I would like to see it happen if the Liberals win, there's a lot of work to do to convince people that that is the proper way to go. You know, Chris Scott, I've mentioned this a couple of times already. Chris was selling gas at the Whistle Stop Cafe and Mirror at 80 cents a liter for, a couple of hours until he ran out last week to show people that in an independent Alberta, that's what gas prices would be like all the time, not just on a special day that rarely ever happens. It would be like that all the time. You wouldn't have to worry about income taxes. Your life would be so much better. Yeah, but we wouldn't be Canadians anymore. Well, nobody's saying that you have to revoke your Canadian citizenship. That's the other thing that Jeff Rath was saying from the Alberta Prosperity Project on the show about a week and a half ago. He said, you can have dual citizenship. You can be a Canadian citizen and an Alberta citizen all at the same time. Let's get back to Mark Carney for a second here. Now, remember last night on the show, I said I wanted to get this woman, Desiree Fixler, on the show. Desiree Fixler is an investment banker who says here on X that her mission is to end ESG and DEI in the corporate world, free enterprise, free speech activist. And so she put this out about a week and a half ago. Canada, you're in crisis. Your crisis isn't U.S. tariffs. It's Mark Carney. He's lying. He will never grow your economy. Carney is a managerial elitist pushing the Davos agenda, net zero, CBDC, DEI, and many other strangleholds on growth and freedom. She says, I know because I was one of them. So as I said these words last night, let's get Desiree Fixler on the show, and we may still just do that. I think she dropped everything she needed to drop today on a special episode of Northern Perspective. So kudos to you guys for getting her on. Fantastic. The interview is an hour long. You can find Northern Perspective on YouTube. If you're not following them, I suggest go give them a follow because they do a lot of good work. Here is an excerpt. I want to thank the Northern Perspective people for putting this out there, and I'm using your stuff right now. Here's Desiree.
Just a little bit of background, while Mark Carney was, of course, governor of the Bank of England, a lot of folks felt he was starting to spend more time on climate risk than financial stability, right? So that becomes very pronounced in the UK, and during a time where the UK has lackluster growth, right, and lackluster productivity numbers. But as soon as his stint ends, of course, he jumps to Brookfield as head of ESG, takes on a whole bunch of other climate advisory roles or just any non-executive positions, one of which is to lead GFANS, which stands for the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And again, this is 2020 at a time where Wall Street is just piling in. And so most of the large financial institutions, banks, asset managers, insurers, all, join this network.
BlackRock was in there among
others.
Others.
Yes. And again, the statement, Mark Carney as the ringleader, and really perceived as the, he is the head of the whole ESG movement globally, right? And
he's the Messiah.
Oh, yes. I was, obviously very entrenched in this. It was, and honestly, I'm not exaggerating that I would say 75 to 80% of the conferences that I attended, Mark Carney was always there, or like, zoomed in right on the big screen. And he was really, and he, is considered the ringleader of this whole movement. And, Mark Carney, is promoting climate action, DEI, and, making statements like, look, big business, is entirely behind this. Over $130 trillion are is pledged to net zero, to climate action. We are transitioning the world economy. This is about making energy, ultimately more affordable, creating more jobs, right? This is, the way forward because, of course, we have a climate emergency. So, he was fear-mongering a lot, really talking up a climate catastrophe and emergency. And then, making statements that, everyone was behind this, total agreement, it's obvious, it's science, 97% of, scientists agree that we have this climate emergency and need to reduce emissions immediately. The reality was totally different. It was like a wrecking ball, an absolute wrecking ball of false claims. It wasn't $130 trillion dedicated to climate action. It was just that was the number of the members' assets. It was just...
I'm happy and a little upset at the same time. I'm happy that she got interviewed by one of our people, by one of our shows. I'm not happy that it wasn't me. I could still try, but I think she dropped everything she needed to drop in that hour-long episode of Northern Perspective. So I am going to go ahead and suggest to you guys that you watch that interview on Northern Perspective. You go ahead, you follow Northern Perspective. Again, they do great work on that channel. And this interview was a great get. And the entire thing is a fantastic listen. And more importantly, because I think they've got over 100,000 followers at this stage. They're doing very well. The people, the normies out there, the liberal voters, they need to hear this. They need to hear about how this whole green thing is just a big grift. It's just a big scam. That's all it ever was. You know that. I know that. And we can say that all we want here in our little echo chamber. And I might get canceled off YouTube for saying that right now. That's only my personal opinion, YouTube algorithms, by the way. But that's how I feel about it. I've always felt that way about it. Anything you can't speak out against, anything you get called a denialist for, is a psyop. People need to hear that. So would you please share out that Northern Perspective interview to as many of your liberal friends as you possibly can. Thank you very much for doing that. It's very important. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and share this show as well on whatever platform you happen to be watching on. Here's some great news from the United States. I don't know if it's going to make it into Canada, but we can always cross our fingers. From Resist the Mainstream, RFK Jr. takes bold stand against fluoride in drinking water, calls for federal reassessment. This is great, actually. Bold move. RFK Jr. is making against fluoridating public drinking water. A vocal critic of vaccine mandates, Kennedy is now turning his attention to fluoride, calling it a dangerous neurotoxin. As we know, he's been saying for years, and he announced plans to direct the CDC to stop recommending fluoride in drinking water following the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's decision to review the potential health risks of fluoride. At a press conference in Salt Lake City, Kennedy outlined his intentions to assemble a team of health experts to examine fluoride's effects. He explained that while he lacks the authority to stop communities from fluoridating their water, he can work with the EPA to reconsider the maximum allowed fluoride levels in public water systems. That is absolutely fantastic news. Donald Trump is dropping a bomb on China tonight at midnight. Here is White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt with the bombshell.
China, who have chosen to retaliate and try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers, are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break, and America will not break under his leadership. He is guided by a firm belief that America must be able to produce essential goods for our own people and export them to the rest of the world. A strong America cannot be solely dependent on foreign countries for our food, medicines, and critical minerals. I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that she and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
So China has to call first?
The Chinese want to make a deal. They just don't know how to do it. But the president will be implementing these 104% tariffs on China tonight.
104% tariffs on China. How many of you guys out there believe that Donald Trump is putting these tariffs on Canada because he wants to recoup that, whatever, what does he say, 200 billion? We're in a deficit, a trade deficit with Canada of $200 billion a year. Why should we be in a deficit with them of $200 billion a year? Why don't they just become a state? Does anybody really think that he cares about $200 billion? He's talking about trillions of dollars with these tariffs, not just billions. And do you think that he would really want to antagonize the biggest trading partner the United States has? This is not to say that they need us because our economies are, I mean, come on, they're 10 times the size of Canada. We're like a mosquito to them. But we've been a kind of benevolent, goofy neighbor to them for the last, 50 or so years. And, we're the lovely, we're the cute little Canadians, to the Americans for the most part. And then why would he want to start a thing with us? He doesn't. He wants to start a thing with China. Randy said this last night. I agreed, and I think I've said this in the past as well. Trump's at war. He's at war with the EU. He's at war with India, which have capitulated, by the way. He's at war with every country that charges ridiculous tariffs on the United States that the United States hadn't up until now been charging on those countries. And China is on his list in particular, number one on the hit parade and climbing, to use an old 50s DJ expression. China is Trump's target. He sees them gaining with their economy. He sees them catching up to the United States, and he does not want that to happen. And he doesn't want them to get too powerful militarily either. He does not want them to have the North, the Arctic region, which is something they want. Their Navy has been spotted up there. The Russian Navy has been spotted up there. Trump has made friends with Putin again. It's a whole big geopolitical realignment going on right now, but China is definitely on Trump's list. Do you think he doesn't know that China pretty much controls Canada right now, economically and governmentally? Of course he does. Of course he knows. And do you think the discussions that he's been having with people like Doug Ford and Danielle Smith and whoever the prime minister is going to be in the next 3 weeks, do you think and Trudeau, do you think that he hasn't said to them, get rid of the Chinese influence in your government, in your judicial system, in your police forces, in your provinces? Get rid of the drugs, get rid of the Chinese property ownership, get rid of the Chinese mine ownership, land ownership, any of it. Or we're going to slap you down hard. The whole play has been, yeah, sure, let's make Canada the 51st state. That whole imaginary line that somebody drew there 150 years ago, That doesn't look right. We should all be one big happy family. Looks better on a map. Whatever he says. He doesn't care about Canada. Maybe he could use our rare earth, our oil. But he keeps saying Canada doesn't have anything we really need. He's going to get rare earth from Ukraine. The United States are a powerful enough country, and they are the most powerful country in the history of the planet, that they can go anywhere and take anything they want, if they want it, covertly or by other means. Trade, I suppose. So it's not like Trump is ever going to invade Canada. The Liberals have been using this whole elbows up thing as just an election ploy. It's nothing. Those tariffs are going to evaporate. What Trump, in my opinion, has been saying to all of these Canadian officials who have gone there to visit him and negotiate, try and, reduce the tariffs or get them taken off altogether or get them pushed back so we have more time to prepare, whatever. He's been saying to them, get rid of the Chinese. They're a plague. Get rid of them in your universities. Get rid of them in your cities. And we're not talking about the people of China. And you see, this is where the left will jump on a show like this and they'll say, racist, you're a racist. No, I'm not talking about the people of China. I am talking about the Chinese communist, totalitarian, authoritarian regime that has been for the last 10 or 11 years enacting, a genocide. I shouldn't say that on YouTube, the G word. Geno-side. That's not how it's spelled, but trying to trick the algorithms here. On the Uyghur people in the northwest part of that country. So what's China's response to these 104% tariffs Trump is slapping on tonight? Well, according to Gizmodo.com, China is reportedly considering a ban on America's greatest export, middling Hollywood blockbusters. So Xi Jinping says, no more American movies. We're not allowing them in our country. Now, China pretty much runs Hollywood because 1.4 billion people, right? So remember a few years ago when John Cena, the former wrestler and then turned actor, he said, what did he say? Something like, Taiwan is a country. And the Chinese got all up in arms and they canceled his movie and he had to actually go and do an apology in Chinese. Here it is.
然后中国就是叫西呢，我必须说现在，在速度与激情中，我做很多采访，很多，所以在一个采访，我有一个错误，所有人问我。如果我可以用中文，速度与激情主人给我很多资讯 information，所以很多采访，很多 information，我有一个错误，我必须说现在就是很重要，我爱上中国跟中国人，我很抱歉。对我的错误，对不起，我很抱歉。
Oh my God！
了解，我很爱、很尊重中国跟中国人，不好意思，再见。
Can you imagine being a famous actor having to go on your knees to the communist Chinese? I'm so sorry, in their own language. There's still like 20 countries in the world that recognize Taiwan as a country, including the Vatican. John Cena, famous movie actor, famous WWE wrestler, has got to go crawling, speaking Chinese. I'm sorry, I called Taiwan a country. Are you freaking kidding me? But look at this. Look at this here. How China's taking over Hollywood. In 2020, China became the world's #1 box office market. For years, the Chinese Communist Party has been using this economic leverage to shape the content of American movies. Well, it's a good thing they're out then, isn't it? If Hollywood goes, I was going to say tits up. I just said it anyway. If that's a good thing. because we know that they've been putting out some pretty toxic Marxist demonic poison for the last 10 years, haven't they? And they're all left-wing, like nutbags, most of them. So if Hollywood goes away, I'm not at all upset by that. Considering some of the movies that have been coming out with these DEI blockbusters. Like, what was that one? Snow White? Was it a Disney DEI where they had a black Snow White? The movie shipped with a toe tag. It was so bad. But why do we want to do business with a communist, totalitarian, authoritarian government anyway? That is in the middle of an ongoing genocide. It has been for the last 11 years. China's repression of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. More than and it's because they're Muslim. You're not allowed to have religion in a communist country. I mean, people pray to Buddha quietly, but you can't do it openly. Oh, no. No. The only people that you can't pray to would be Xi Jinping and his, what do you call them? I forget the name that communist regimes use. Secretary Party, whatever. More than 1 million Muslims have been arbitrarily detained in China's Xinjiang region. The re-education camps. Re-education camps are just one part of the government's crackdown on Uyghurs. So if you're suspected to be a Uyghur Muslim, Chinese Muslim, you get rounded up, thrown in the back of a van, taken to some camp, and that's where you stay for the rest of your life, never to be seen again. About 11 million Uyghurs, a mostly Muslim, Turkic-speaking ethnic group, live in the northwestern region of Xinjiang. The Chinese government has imprisoned more than 1 million people since 2017 and subjected those not detained to intense surveillance, religious restrictions, forced labor, and forced sterilizations. The United States determined that China's actions constitute genocide, while a UN report said they could amount to crimes against humanity. But hey, Mark Carney, let's get into bed with China. Man, we should not be doing, I don't care. We should not be doing business with these people at all. That's it for the show tonight, you guys. But for the All Access folks, we have part 4.2 of Europa, the last battle, coming up in just a couple of minutes. If you're not an All Access member, become one at shadowdavis.com. Just like it's spelled right there at the bottom of the screen, SHADOEDAVAS.com. Monthly membership costs you like $11 or $12, and you get the extra content, and you'll be eligible to win the Shadow at Night Live hats or mug, your choice. We're going to start giving those away, like I said, on Thursday night. We're going to do it once or twice a week, depending on how I feel. But only All Access members will be allowed to win those, at least for now. All right. You guys have a great night. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I'll catch you back here tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central. I'm just looking for my extra here. 8 o'clock Central for another Shadow at Night live stream. Bye for now. All Access. I'll see you in 2 minutes.